The SS Pathfinder drifted silently through the uncharted void, its sleek hull reflecting the light of distant stars. On board, the crew was focused on their screens, monitoring every pulse, every signal in this unexplored region of the galaxy. The mission was simple: to map new territories and gather data for future colonization efforts. But simplicity had a way of getting complicated in the deep, dark unknown. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the control room. A distress signal flickered on their screens, coming from a nearby, lifeless planet. Captain Elias, a seasoned explorer with a reputation for cautious daring, leaned forward, studying the data. The signal was faint, erratic, as if struggling against interference. "It's an old emergency frequency," First Officer Lee noted, frowning. "But the source, it's coming from the surface. No known colonies or installations there." Dr. Aria Wells, the ship's xenobiologist, tapped a few commands, pulling up the planet's basic data. "Atmosphere is thin, barely breathable. No signs of human life, but there is something else. Massive energy spikes. Unstable. Could be biological?" Lee's eyes narrowed. "Growlar territory." The name sent a shiver through the room. The Growlar were a species feared across the galaxy, apex predators known for their intelligence and terrifying strength. Few had seen one and lived to tell the tale. The Galactic Council had strictly forbidden any contact, labeling them untamable and too dangerous. But here they were, close, too close, to the source of a distress call. "We should move on," Lee suggested quickly, concern etched across his face. "This isn't our fight. We have orders to avoid any direct engagement." Captain Elias remained silent, weighing the options. Every protocol dictated that they turn back, leave this planet and its dangerous inhabitants far behind. But the distress signal tugged at something deeper, a sense of duty, a curiosity he couldn't shake. "We don't even know who or what sent that signal. What if someone needs help?" Dr. Wells chimed in, her voice thoughtful. "If it's Growlar, we have an opportunity here. No one has ever tried to understand them, only to fear them. We could learn something valuable." Lee's skepticism remained. "Or we could die trying." Elias looked at his team, seeing both fear and determination in their eyes. "We'll investigate," he decided, his tone firm but calm. "Carefully. We'll make contact if possible. No unnecessary risks. But we're not running away just because it's difficult." The descent to the planet was tense, the atmosphere thin and hazy with dust. The ship landed in a rocky clearing, the terrain harsh and desolate. The crew moved cautiously, their suits equipped with scanners and communication devices. Elias took the lead, with Wells beside him, and Lee guarding the rear. As they moved closer to the source of the signal, they saw it, the Growlar, a towering figure half-shrouded in mist, its scaled body rippling with muscle, its eyes glowing with a predatory intelligence. It let out a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the air, a sound that felt almost like a challenge. Elias held up a hand, signaling the others to stop. They began transmitting a series of peaceful signals through their advanced communicators, broadcasting in multiple frequencies, hoping to find one the Growlar might recognize. The creature responded with a sudden, swift movement, a powerful roar that rattled their bones, a clear display of aggression. Lee gripped his weapon tightly. This isn't going well. The initial attempts at contact were failing. The Growlar seemed to become more agitated with each new signal, circling them with a calculated menace. Wells watched its movements closely, her analytical mind racing. "It's not just attacking. It's thinking, testing us." Elias nodded. "Traditional methods won't work here. We need to try something different." Instead of more signals or attempts at verbal communication, Elias made a bold decision. They removed their helmets, a sign of vulnerability, and presented a small, carefully chosen offering, food, placed slowly on the ground between them and the Growlar. They stepped back, watching closely. The Growlar paused, its eyes flickering from the humans to the food. It didn't move immediately, watching, waiting. Wells noticed a slight change in its posture, a lessening of the tension in its muscles. "It's curious, maybe even confused," she whispered. They stood still, maintaining their distance, allowing the creature to approach. Slowly it moved forward, sniffing the air, its massive claws digging into the ground with each step. It reached the offering and sniffed again, hesitating. Elias kept his voice calm, steady. "We're not here to hurt you," he murmured, knowing full well the creature might not understand, but hoping the tone would convey their intent. After a tense moment, the growler took the food, retreating a few steps. It didn't attack, didn't roar, just observed. Wells felt a small surge of hope. It's listening in its own way. The humans remained still, showing no signs of threat. The growler, still wary, didn't display the overt aggression from before. For the first time, they sensed a shift, a small, tentative step away from hostility. The crew's first attempts at communication with the growler were met with cautious curiosity. Observing the creature's movements, Dr. Aria Wells meticulously recorded every flicker of its eyes, every twitch of its massive limbs, and every rumbling growl that seemed to have a rhythm, almost like a language of its own. Hours turned into days as the crew stayed close, learning, adapting, and adjusting their approach. Wells noted that the creature responded differently to various sounds. She realized it might not rely solely on sight or hearing but possibly a complex combination of sensory inputs. She proposed a new method, using tonal sequences with specific intervals that might mirror the creature's low-frequency growls. The crew set up devices to emit these sounds, carefully calibrated to avoid triggering aggression. At first, the growler remained distant, its eyes wary but its body language less hostile. After several attempts, it began to respond with softer growls of its own, as if testing the human's intentions. Each response was documented, analyzed, and refined. The growler seemed to be recognizing patterns, even showing signs of curiosity when the humans adjusted the tones slightly. Encouraged by this progress, the crew decided to push further. They replicated more of the creature's behaviors, moving slowly and adopting its own posture when it seemed agitated. They mimicked its head tilts and slow, deliberate movements. Small changes in its behavior started to become apparent. It held its ground but did not charge. There was a delicate dance of trust in the making. Then came the setback. While attempting to extend their makeshift communication, the growler suddenly lashed out, its claws tearing through equipment, and narrowly missing one of the crew members. Panic surged through the team, but Captain Elias remained calm. "Hold your positions," he ordered. No one reached for their weapons, instead they froze, making themselves appear small, non-threatening. It took time, but the creature eventually backed off, eyeing them cautiously. It was a tense standoff, but the humans didn't retaliate. They waited, showing patience and resilience, and the growler seemed to notice. It returned to a more relaxed posture, as if sensing that the humans were different, not enemies but something else entirely. Days passed, and the growler's behavior shifted again. It started to observe them closely, watching their every move. When they set up camp, it remained at a distance, its gaze never leaving them. Wells continued to take notes, fascinated by the creature's increasing attentiveness. The creature began to mimic small actions, like bending down when a crew member did or tilting its head at the same angle. The breakthrough came when they noticed the growler copying their hand movements during one of their signal tests. Wells, excited, repeated the gestures slowly, and the creature mirrored them again. A moment of understanding passed between them. They weren't just being tolerated, they were being understood. The crew's collective heart swelled with cautious optimism. One day, a sudden tremor rocked the ground. The crew looked up in alarm as the sky darkened with ash and smoke. A distant rumble grew louder, the earth beneath them quaking violently. It was a volcanic eruption. They scrambled for cover, struggling to find stable ground. The growler, surprisingly, didn't flee. Instead, it moved closer, shielding them from falling debris with its massive body, guiding them towards safer terrain with a series of guttural sounds that seemed almost like commands. They followed its lead, ducking under its protective frame as it maneuvered them away from the danger zone. As they reached a safer area, Elias looked back at the creature, who now stood panting but unharmed, watching them intently. Wells felt a surge of realization. This was more than just instinct, it was cooperation. The Growlar had chosen to protect them. The tremors subsided, and an eerie calm settled over the landscape. The crew stood in stunned silence, aware of the significance of what had just happened. The Growlar, too, remained still, its eyes meeting theirs. There was no aggression, no challenge in its gaze. Just a calm, almost contemplative look. Captain Elias took a slow step forward, his hands open in a gesture of peace. "You saved us," he said quietly, even though he knew the creature might not understand his words. "Thank you?" The Growler gave a low, rumbling sound, one that seemed different from its previous growls. It wasn't a threat or a warning. It felt like an acknowledgement, maybe even a response. The humans and the Growler stood there, facing each other, a silent understanding forming in the space between them. As the days passed, the crew's understanding of the Growler grew deeper. Yet, despite the creature's calmer demeanor, there were moments when it would suddenly tense, eyes narrowing as if battling some unseen force. At times, it seemed to be in pain, its body trembling, a low growl rumbling from deep within its chest. These moments of distress were sporadic but alarming. Dr. Aria Wells, who had been carefully documenting every interaction, noticed a pattern. The creature's agitation wasn't triggered by their presence but appeared to come from within. Something else was affecting it. Wells began to suspect that the Growlar's aggression wasn't just inherent to its nature. There was a deeper mystery here, something hidden behind those intense eyes that looked more tired than fierce. She shared her thoughts with Captain Elias, who agreed that they needed to understand more. The Growlar had shown them unexpected trust. Perhaps there was a way to learn the truth behind its troubled behavior. In an act of trust, the Growlar began leading the humans through the dense terrain, its powerful frame moving with a purpose. It brought them to a hidden cave, concealed by a wall of thick vegetation. Inside, the air was damp and filled with an eerie quiet. As they ventured deeper, they saw strange carvings on the walls, crude but intricate, depicting scenes that seemed to tell a story. Wells approached cautiously, her eyes widening as she realized what she was seeing. The carvings showed images of beings that looked like the Growlar, but their expressions were softer, their bodies adorned with symbols and patterns that suggested a culture, a society. There were scenes of the Growlar working together, building, creating, nothing like the monstrous creatures feared throughout the galaxy. But then, the images changed. The once peaceful scenes gave way to chaos, depictions of dark, shadowy figures descending upon the Growlar, and something terrible, a slithering, formless mass that seemed to coil around them. The crew pieced it together slowly. The carvings told the story of a species that had once been intelligent and harmonious but had been attacked by a force that brought madness and rage. Wells ran her fingers over the final carvings, depicting the Growlar with wild eyes and bared teeth, their bodies twisted in pain. "A parasite," she murmured. "Something that invades their minds, controls them, turns them into the aggressive creatures we know them to be." Captain Elias stepped closer, his expression grim. "This explains their hostility, their unpredictability. They're not just predators, they're victims." The crew realized the gravity of what they had discovered. The parasite didn't just enhance aggression, it fed on it, thriving on the fear and violence it provoked. It had transformed a peaceful species into a terror that haunted the galaxy. The Growlar were fighting a battle not just against others, but within themselves. Elias knew they had crossed a line. The Galactic Council had warned against any engagement, yet here they were, uncovering a secret that could challenge the very foundation of interspecies relations. But he felt a growing sense of responsibility. "We can't just walk away from this," he said firmly. "If there's a chance we can help, we have to try." There was hesitation among the crew. They understood the risks, violating direct orders from the Council, provoking a creature known for its deadly power, and attempting something that had never been done before. But Wells, driven by empathy and scientific curiosity, argued passionately. "We have the technology, the knowledge. If we can isolate the parasite, understand how it controls them, maybe we can find a way to remove it." The crew debated their next steps, weighing the dangers against their sense of duty. In the end, they agreed. They had already forged a fragile connection with the Growlar, and abandoning it now would mean leaving it to its fate. Elias nodded at Wells. Start working on a plan. We'll need to approach this carefully. They began with non-invasive scans, using handheld devices to analyze the creature's neural patterns. The Growlar stood still, allowing them to work, its eyes calm but watchful. The readings were complex, showing signs of a foreign entity deeply embedded within its brain. The parasite wasn't just attached, it was intertwined with the neural pathways, feeding off the Growlar's emotions and instincts. It was more pervasive than they had imagined, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the creature's mind. Wells's face tightened with concentration. It's worse than I thought. The parasite has integrated itself almost completely. This won't be easy. The crew continued their scans, collecting data, trying to map the parasite's structure and its connection to the Growlar's neural network. Each new scan revealed more about its nature, its ability to manipulate emotions, its insidious method of control. It became clear that any attempt to remove it would require both precision and a deep understanding of the Growlar's biology. Elias studied the data, understanding the enormity of what they were attempting. We have to proceed, but carefully. If we make a mistake, we could do more harm than good. They faced a daunting challenge, but they were resolved. They had a plan, a chance, however slim, to free the Growlar from the torment that had plagued it for so long. The crew knew the task ahead would be challenging and dangerous, but they were determined. Using the data they had collected, Dr. Wells devised a method that combined their most advanced medical technology with a unique understanding of the Growlar's biology. The plan was to use targeted electromagnetic pulses to disrupt the parasite's neural connections, breaking its control over the host. However, the process had to be carefully calibrated. Too strong a pulse could harm the Growlar's brain, and too weak wouldn't affect the parasite. They began the procedure in the ship's medical bay, with the Growlar lying still, its massive body almost too large for the space. The air was thick with tension. Each member of the crew had a specific role, monitoring vital signs, adjusting the medical equipment, and keeping the Growlar calm. Wells worked steadily, her focus absolute, directing the pulses toward the parasite's tendrils, which were deeply embedded in the creature's neural tissue. The first attempt brought immediate resistance. The parasite seemed to fight back, its hold tightening, causing the Growlar to convulse slightly, its eyes filled with pain. The crew held their breath, every second stretching into an eternity. Wells quickly recalibrated, adjusting the frequencies to a more precise wavelength. The pulses continued, and this time, the readings showed a shift. The parasite's neural connections began to weaken, but only slightly. Captain Elias maintained a steady gaze on the creature, speaking softly, reassuring it, urging it to hold on. The Growlar's eyes remained on him, flickering with trust and a growing determination. It was a delicate balance, maintaining the Growlar's confidence while they continued their risky work. Just as the procedure seemed to be making progress, alarms blared throughout the ship. The screens flashed with an alert. A Galactic Council enforcement ship had arrived, hovering just outside, sending repeated demands for communication. They had detected unauthorized contact with the Growlar, and their intentions were clear. This was a violation that could not go unpunished. The crew's heartbeats quickened. Elias answered the incoming hail, the stern face of a council officer appearing on the screen. "You are in direct violation of council mandate," the officer declared, voice sharp with authority. "Cease all activity and prepare to be boarded. You will be held accountable for your actions." Elias kept his voice calm, stalling for time. "We're in the middle of a critical medical procedure. If you interrupt us now, it could cause irreparable harm, not just to us but to a sentient being. I asked for a moment to complete our work. This isn't just about breaking rules, it's about saving a life." The officer frowned. "You've engaged with a Growlar, a forbidden species. You're risking a galactic incident. We cannot allow this to continue." Wells glanced at Elias, her hands still working steadily. "We need a few more minutes," she whispered urgently. "We're almost there." Elias continued to negotiate, appealing to the officer's sense of reason and the potential scientific value of what they were doing. He argued that this could be a breakthrough, a way to tame the Growler threat without further conflict. The officer hesitated, clearly unsure. Meanwhile, the tension in the medical bay was rising. The crew worked faster. The pulses grew more targeted, the parasite's grip visibly weakening. The Growler's body began to relax slightly, its breathing steadying. For the first time, its eyes seemed clear, focused, understanding. Wells gave a slight nod to Elias. They were close. But the enforcement ship wasn't waiting. Another demand came through, the officer's patience thinning. "This is your final warning. Cease all activities immediately, or we will be forced to intervene." Elias knew they were out of time. "We need 1 more minute. Just 1. Please." He kept his tone firm but respectful, hoping to buy those precious final moments. Then, the final pulses were sent. The parasite's tendrils began to retract, its presence shrinking within the Growler's neural pathways. The creature's body shuddered once more, and then, stillness. A silence fell over the room as the readings stabilized. The parasite was no longer in control. The Growler, free for the first time in possibly centuries, lifted its head slowly, looking around with a clarity that was unmistakable. The enforcement ship's alarms blared again, but this time, the Growler stepped forward. It moved with purpose, its body language showing neither aggression nor fear. Instead, it emitted a series of sounds, not the guttural growls they had heard before, but something softer, more deliberate, almost like speech. Wells listened closely, her eyes widening with realization. The creature was trying to communicate, and with each sound, it became clearer. The Growler spoke of oppression, of a long history of suffering under another alien race that had nearly exterminated them, and created the parasite to keep them under control. It was a story of survival, resistance, and pain, and now, finally, a chance for freedom. Elias turned back to the enforcement officer, whose face had shifted from stern to shocked. "You see," he said, "this isn't just about breaking rules. We've discovered something that could change everything. The Growler aren't our enemies. They're victims, like so many others. And we have a chance to help them." There was a long pause. The officer finally spoke. "This will require a report, an investigation. But for now, you may proceed." Elias nodded, sensing a fragile opportunity. "Thank you. We'll cooperate in any way necessary. But understand, we intend to protect this creature and any others like it from further harm." The crew felt a wave of relief, but they knew this was only a temporary reprieve. With the Growler now freed from the parasite's control, the crew of the SS Pathfinder and their new ally turned their attention to the source of the suffering, the alien race responsible for the creation of the parasite. Using data gathered from the Growler's memories and records hidden within the cave, they pinpointed the location of the oppressors' base, a remote outpost on the edge of a desolate star system. The crew knew this mission would be dangerous, possibly even suicidal, but they were resolved to bring justice, not just for the Growler, but for all species subjected to such cruelty. Captain Elias gathered the crew and their Growler ally in the briefing room, where they laid out a plan. The Growler, with its newly awakened intelligence, provided invaluable insight into the oppressors' tactics and weaknesses. It described hidden weapons caches, key control points, and the structure of the base. The humans, in turn, shared their knowledge of technology and strategy, creating a plan that leveraged both their strengths. Every move was calculated, every risk measured. Tension was high as they prepared for the confrontation. The crew made final checks on their weapons and equipment, ensuring everything was in perfect condition. They modified their ship's systems to align with the Growler's natural abilities, creating a unique synergy between human technology and the creature's raw strength. Wells worked closely with the Growler, helping it understand the controls and the strategy they would employ. There was no room for error, they would have only one chance to succeed. When the moment arrived, they launched their attack. The SS Pathfinder, moving with uncharacteristic agility, slipped through the enemy's perimeter defenses undetected, thanks to the Growler's knowledge of their blind spots. Once in range, they unleashed a barrage of targeted strikes against the oppressors' communication arrays, effectively cutting off their lines to call for reinforcements. The Growlar, with its immense physical power and keen instincts, led a ground assault, tearing through barriers and defenses with a ferocity tempered by newfound intelligence and strategy. The battle was fierce, a complex dance of firepower and brute force. The oppressors, initially caught off guard, quickly regrouped and launched a counterattack. The air crackled with energy blasts, and the ground shook with explosions. The crew of the SS Pathfinder fought with everything they had, combining their advanced weaponry with the Growlar's raw combat prowess. The creature moved with purpose, targeting enemy strongholds, and using its strength to clear paths through fortified structures. Elias coordinated the assault from the ship, issuing commands with precision, directing both his crew and the Growlar with an understanding that only came from trust. Wells and Lee fought side by side with the Growlar on the ground, providing cover fire and support, their actions perfectly synchronized. The unity between humans and their unexpected ally was evident. Where the Growlar could not reach, the humans intervened with their technological expertise, and where human strength was insufficient, the Growlar's power prevailed. Amidst the chaos, there were moments of profound cooperation. The Growlar shielded the humans from a collapsing structure, using its massive body as a barrier. In turn, Wells used her medical knowledge to tend to the creature's wounds, applying quick, makeshift treatments on the battlefield. They communicated through gestures and simple sounds, each understanding the other's intent without needing words. The tide of the battle began to turn. The enemy forces, disoriented and overwhelmed by the unexpected alliance, started to falter. Key control points fell one by one, their defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. Finally, they reached the core of the oppressor's base, where the leaders of the alien race were making a desperate stand. In a final, coordinated strike, the humans and the Growlar broke through the last line of defense. The oppressors, realizing defeat was inevitable, attempted to flee, but the crew quickly subdued them, capturing the key figures responsible for the creation of the parasite and the suffering of the Growlar. The battle was won, but it had been hard fought, a victory forged from a blend of courage, intelligence, and unity. With the oppressor's base under their control, they began the process of freeing any remaining Growlar still under the parasite's influence. Wells and the medical team worked tirelessly, using the cure they had developed to remove the parasites, one by one, from the surviving Growlar. The creatures, once freed, showed the same signs of intelligence and gratitude as their first ally, a testament to the potential for change that lay within them. The news of the humans' actions and their alliance with the Growlar quickly reached the Galactic Council. Initially, the Council's response was hostile. They were concerned about the potential ramifications of breaking their ban. But as reports of the humans' success in liberating an entire species from oppression and revealing the truth behind their violent history spread, opinions began to shift. The Council members debated fiercely, but ultimately, they could not ignore the significance of what had been achieved. Under pressure from the public and the new information, the Council reluctantly reconsidered its stance. They saw the value in understanding the Growlar rather than fearing them and began discussions on new policies regarding their treatment. They also recognized that humanity's actions had demonstrated a unique capacity for empathy, bravery, and collaboration that went beyond the typical expectations of interspecies relations. Back on the SS Pathfinder, humans and Growlar stood side by side, united by their shared experiences. They had faced an enemy together, defied expectations, and emerged victorious. There was a quiet understanding that they were no longer just allies by circumstance but partners with a common cause. They vowed to continue their work together, to prevent any species from suffering as the Growlar had, and to build a future where cooperation was the rule, not the exception. As they looked out into the vast expanse of space, they knew their journey was far from over.